I always believed that nothing could tear us apart. Claire and I had faced every storm side by side, every setback, every heartbreak. But nothing prepared me for those endless nights in the hospital, sitting by our child's bed while the machines hummed and beeped, each sound a cruel reminder of how fragile everything was. The harsh lights made everything feel colder, sharper, as if hope itself was slipping away. In those nights, I thought Claire was right there with me. But slowly, I started to notice how she'd turn away, her face lit up by the glow of her phone instead of the pale blue light of our child's monitor. I told myself it was just stress, that we were both holding on in our own ways. But her laughter, soft, secretive, echoed in my head long after she'd fallen silent. Each time she looked at her phone, it felt like another small betrayal I was too scared to name. I tried to bury it, to focus on the one thing that mattered, our child. But every night, as I sat in that stiff plastic chair, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping through my fingers. The distance between us grew wider, stretched thin by every glance she gave to someone else and every silence that followed. It felt like I was the only one still fighting for us, even as I realized she'd already let go. I remember the night I finally saw the truth. Our child had just drifted off after another restless night, and I went to find some coffee, anything to keep me awake. But when I came back, Claire was standing by the window, phone in hand, her face glowing in the darkness. I watched her fingers move across the screen, so sure, so familiar. And when I asked her who she was texting, she turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She didn't answer right away. She just tucked the phone away and told me not to worry, that it wasn't what I thought. But I knew. I knew the way you know when your heart breaks, quiet and shattering all at once. I didn't ask again. I didn't shout or demand to see the messages. In that moment, I understood that I didn't need the words. The truth was already there in the way she wouldn't meet my eyes. Later that night, I found the messages. She hadn't even bothered to hide them well. The words cut deeper than any argument we'd ever had. Sweet, intimate messages that were never meant for me. It felt like I was drowning in the quiet of that hospital room, the beeping machines mocking the silence between us. I thought I'd feel rage, but all I felt was a hollow ache in my chest, like everything I'd built was crumbling around me. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, staring at the messages that spelled out the end of everything we'd shared. My hands were shaking, but my voice stayed locked somewhere deep inside me. Maybe it was shock, or maybe I just didn't want to break the fragile calm of that night. I kept thinking about our child, about how their small breaths were the only thing anchoring me to that room. Claire tried to talk to me then, her voice soft and desperate, but I didn't want to hear it. She said it was a mistake, that she didn't mean for it to happen. But the words felt like echoes in a room I'd already decided to leave behind. In that moment, I realized something I'd never imagined. I wouldn't fight. I wouldn't scream or plead. I would let her go without another word. And so I did. I sat there in the sterile light of that hospital room, and I made a decision that would shape the rest of my life. I wouldn't let this betrayal become a battle. I wouldn't let her excuses drown out the truth I'd seen with my own eyes. I would care for our child, love them with every part of me, but I would never speak to her again. Every morning after that night, I woke up with the same quiet determination. My world had shrunk to a single purpose, taking care of our child. I learned how to smile through the pain, how to make breakfast and pack school bags as if nothing had changed. The house felt like a stage, each of us playing our parts in a silent play that no one else could see. But inside, there was nothing left to say. Claire tried, at first. She'd start to speak, her eyes searching mine for a crack in the wall I'd built. But I wouldn't let her in. There was no anger in me anymore, just a cold, steady silence that wrapped around my heart like armor. I think she thought that if she apologized enough, I'd forgive her. But she never understood that some betrayals cut so deep they leave no room for forgiveness. Friends and family started to notice the distance between us, asking if we were okay, if something had happened. I just smile and change the subject, because the truth felt too heavy to share. I didn't want to explain, to relive the heartbreak over and over. My silence became my refuge, a quiet place where her lies could never reach me. At home, I moved through each day with a calm that almost felt like peace. I'd help our child with homework, cook dinner, and wash the dishes while Claire hovered in the background, her words always starting and stopping in the air. She'd leave notes on the counter, little reminders that she still wanted to be heard, but I'd just toss them away without reading them. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. There were moments when I could see the panic in her eyes, the way her hands would tremble as she reached for me, but I wouldn't let myself go back. I knew that if I cracked open even a little, all the hurt would come pouring out, and I didn't have the strength for that. Our child needed me whole, not shattered by the weight of her apologies. So I kept my distance, even when it felt like the silence was swallowing me whole. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear her crying in the next room. The sound of her sobs used to break me, but now it was just another part of the house, a door I wouldn't open. My silence wasn't a punishment for her. It was a way to keep myself safe, to keep my heart from bleeding out every time I looked at her. In that quiet, I found a kind of freedom I'd never known before. I knew people would talk, would wonder why I wouldn't just confront her and demand the truth. But I didn't need her confessions to know what she'd done. My silence was my choice, a way of holding on to the only part of myself she hadn't managed to break. I think she thought my quiet was weakness, that if she kept pushing, I'd finally snap. But she didn't understand that I'd already made my decision. I could see it in her eyes when she looked at me, the way her smile would falter, her shoulders sagging under the weight of everything unsaid. She wanted to fix what she'd broken, to make it all go back to how it was. But there was no going back for me. My heart had moved on, even if my body still shared the same roof. Every day, I woke up a little stronger in my silence, a little more certain that this was the only way. And even as the world kept turning around us, school runs, family dinners, holidays where we'd pretend to be a family, I held on to that quiet promise I'd made to myself. I wouldn't fight with her. I wouldn't forgive her. I'd just keep loving our child with everything I had and keep my silence like a shield. Because in that silence, I found the only peace that felt real. The day our child finally got better was the day I knew I had to leave. It wasn't a decision made in anger. It was a quiet resolve that had grown stronger with every day of silence. I packed my things when Claire was out, careful not to wake our child from the first peaceful sleep they'd had in weeks. I left no note, no explanation. Just the echo of my absence in the place we'd once called home. Moving out wasn't as dramatic as I'd imagined. There was no slamming of doors, no final words to mark the end. Just me, a few bags, and a heart that felt lighter than it had in years. My new place was small but clean, with walls that didn't hold the echoes of broken promises. I bought new curtains, new dishes, small things that made the space feel like mine. For the first time in forever, I felt like I could breathe. Of course, Claire tried to reach out. At first, it was constant. Calls, texts, even showing up at my door. But I didn't answer. I couldn't. My silence had become a promise to myself, a line I wouldn't cross for anyone. Each unanswered message was a reminder that I didn't owe her anything anymore. My world was smaller now, simpler, and in that simplicity, I found the first flicker of peace. Every morning in that new apartment felt like waking up to a second chance. I'd make coffee in the quiet kitchen, the smell of it filling the small space and grounding me in the present. My child's laughter became a soundtrack to my mornings, and in those simple sounds, I felt a healing I hadn't known I needed. There were no apologies, no empty promises hanging in the air. Just us and the life we were slowly building together. Some nights, I'd find myself sitting on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. There was a time when I'd have shared those quiet moments with Claire, talking about everything and nothing. But now, I found comfort in the silence, in the way the night wrapped around me like a gentle promise. I wasn't lonely, not really. I had my child, my thoughts, and the space to finally figure out who I was without her shadow. I started to notice the little things again, the way the sun lit up the kitchen in the mornings, the smell of fresh laundry, the sound of my child's footsteps running through the hallway. Each moment felt like a small victory, a reminder that life doesn't end when love does. In those details, I found pieces of myself I thought I'd lost, and I held on to them fiercely, like they were the only things that mattered. Claire still tried to reach out, her words bouncing off the walls I'd built around me. I could hear the regret in her messages, the way she tried to explain the choices she'd made. But I didn't need to hear her reasons anymore. I'd already decided that some doors, once closed, needed to stay locked for good. My silence wasn't about punishment. It was about protecting the fragile peace I'd found for myself and my child. I think there was a part of me that wondered if she'd ever really understand that. The way she kept trying made me believe she still thought I was waiting for her to say the right thing, to fix the unfixable. But I wasn't. I had moved past the point where her words could heal what she'd broken. In my new life, her voice was just another sound I'd learned to tune out. Every day, I felt that freedom grow, not loud or triumphant, but steady and real. I knew the wound of her betrayal would always be there, a faint ache that would never completely fade. But I also knew it didn't have to define me. In that small apartment, surrounded by the simple joys I'd built from scratch, I finally felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. And that was enough. I could see it in her eyes whenever she showed up at my door, the weight of everything she'd lost pressing down on her shoulders. Claire tried to pretend it wasn't too late, that maybe if she found the right words, I'd let her back in. But each time she knocked, I stayed quiet, my resolve as solid as the locked door between us. My silence was the answer she never wanted to hear. I heard about her struggles through friends who didn't know how to stay out of it. She was trying to move on, to find a life that didn't include the man she'd betrayed. But every attempt seemed to crumble under the weight of what she'd done. She was chasing shadows, looking for forgiveness in places I'd already left behind. It wasn't my place to save her from the mess she'd made. And I knew, in the quiet moments, that her guilt was a prison stronger than any words I could have spoken. She carried it in her eyes, in the way she paused when someone mentioned my name. But that was her burden to bear, not mine. I had found peace in the choice to walk away, and no apology from her could ever touch that. My silence was a line drawn in the sand, and I had no intention of crossing it. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of her in the places we used to go, the grocery store, the park where we'd watch our child play. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of her choices had pressed her down into something she didn't recognize. It was strange to see her like that, fragile and unsure, when I remembered how confident she'd always been. But I didn't let it break my resolve. People around us talked, of course. They whispered about how things had ended, about how I'd never raised my voice or made a scene. I think they expected me to be angry, to demand answers or closure. But I'd already found my peace in the quiet, in the decision not to let her betrayals become the story of my life. My silence was my way of saying, this is where it ends. I could see how it haunted her, though. The way she'd pause when she saw me, as if she was searching for the man I'd been before she threw it all away. But I wasn't that man anymore. I'd learned to let go, to build a new life out of the pieces she'd left behind. And every day that I chose not to speak, I felt that life grew a little stronger, a little more real. I think she finally understood, in her own quiet way, that there would never be another chance for us. Her apologies, spoken or silent, couldn't bridge the gap that had grown between us. She was left alone with the echoes of her own choices, and that was something she'd have to live with. I didn't feel anger anymore, just a calm certainty that I'd done the right thing. Our child still asked about her sometimes, and I never spoke badly of her. She was still their mother, and I knew that mattered more than my hurt ever could. But in my heart, I'd closed that chapter for good. I wouldn't let her back in, wouldn't let her rewrite the past we'd both lived through. My silence was my way of keeping that boundary, of protecting the life I'd fought to rebuild. Each day, I woke up to the small comforts I'd created. The smell of coffee in the morning, the soft weight of my child's hand in mine. Those were the things that mattered now, the quiet moments that spoke louder than any words ever could. In the end, Claire's regret was hers to carry, and my peace was mine to keep. Years later, I still think about those nights in the hospital, the endless hours of waiting and the quiet strength it took to keep going. Back then, I thought I'd never get through it, that the weight of betrayal and heartbreak would always feel like a stone in my chest. But looking back now, I see that it was in those silent decisions that I found my real power. I learned that forgiveness isn't always about letting someone back in. Sometimes it's about letting yourself move forward, even when the pain is still there. I didn't need her to understand why I walked away or to hear her say she was sorry for the 100th time. My peace didn't depend on her words. It was something I'd found in the quiet moments, in the small, steady choices I made every day. There are still days when the memories sneak up on me. A song on the radio, a scent in the air that takes me back to the life we once shared. But instead of drowning in the hurt, I let the memories pass through me like a warm breeze. They're just that now. Memories. They don't have the power to break me anymore. I've come to realize that some things don't need to be spoken to be understood. My silence was never about punishment or anger. It was about finding a way to live with the truth without letting it consume me. In that quiet, I discovered a freedom I never thought possible. A life where I could just be, without needing to explain or justify anything to anyone. Claire still tries, every now and then. A text on holidays, a voicemail I never bothered to open. But they're just reminders that I made the right choice. I don't owe her a response. I don't owe her a piece of the life I've built without her. And that knowledge feels like a warm light in my chest. Something steady and sure that no apology could ever replace. I know some people might not understand it. This decision to stay silent instead of screaming my hurt for the world to hear. But I found my own kind of closure, not in her words or her regrets, but in the quiet certainty that I chose what was right for me and for our child. And that's a truth I carry like a shield, one I'll never have to explain. Now, I watch my child grow into someone brave and kind, and I know that everything I did was worth it. We've built a life together that feels real and honest, a life without secrets or half-truths. On quiet nights, we sit side by side, sharing stories and laughter, and I see the future in their eyes, a future that's ours alone. There's a kind of peace in knowing that I don't need anything from Claire anymore. Her regrets belong to her, and my life belongs to me. I've learned that healing doesn't always come with grand gestures or final conversations. Sometimes it's as simple as waking up each day and choosing to move forward, one breath at a time. As I close this chapter, I feel a quiet strength settle into my bones. My silence was never empty. It was full of all the things I didn't need to say to know who I was and what I deserved. And in the end, that silence led me here, to a life where I'm not just surviving, but truly living.